Two are doctoral, one's a master's, and one's a undergraduate. Vocational ministry is undergraduate. So I taught that one, I don't know, last year, a couple years ago. Enjoyed it. Okay, I think it's time. We ready to go? You got my mic on? Okay. Very good. Good to see you this morning. 1 Kings chapter 22. We're going to sort of, hopefully we'll put an end to Ahab. And I don't mean that in a cruel way. We'll finish up that historical section of Ahab. And that's the reason I'm covering chapter 22, well, part of chapter 22. Even though Elijah or Elisha is not mentioned in it, there is a prophet, however, that is the point of focus in chapter 22, Micaiah. And there's other prophets who are, working during the time of Elijah and Elisha. It's just that Elijah and Elisha are so prominent that much of the material revolves around their particular activities and engagement with the kings. But there's, I guess it emphasizes in chapter 22, it might be a cultural thing. I don't know, maybe it's something inside of us. It almost goes back to Eve when she saw the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil. She wanted to, take it because of what reason? What were the reasons that she gave? That it was pleasing to the eye, it looked good for food, and it had the potential of making one wise, opening up the eyes. And it's interesting that seems to be those three avenues of sin seem to be prominent as a theme throughout the Bible. And when you get to 1 John, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eye, and the vainglory of life represents that which is in the world. Of course, it's a summary of all that is away and apart from God. And I've always was curious as to what Eve was thinking when she was hanging around that forbidden tree. The opportunity she had was to continue to eat of the tree of life, and there was no restriction. And all the other trees that were in the garden, it must have been a very, I picture it as a dense garden of fruit trees galore. We have a neighbor beside us just planted a bunch of fruit trees. And it just reminded me of the Garden of Eden. You can eat of any of the fruit trees. You can partake of the tree of life. There was this prospect that human beings were created to live forever. And so here's Eve with Adam is there as well. And she's contemplating in her mind the delight of wanting that fruit. So what was the motivation? Besides the avenues of temptation, why is she thinking that way? Yeah, why would she think about that? It may have been a beautiful fruit, be pleasing to the eye, and there's that promise, but why is she even contemplating those things?
Maybe she didn't believe what the Lord said.
What'd you say, Tracy?
I think the serpent enticed her.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it pictures that, Satan's there. And that would be even, I don't know if this is their first time to ever encounter something like this that is enticing them. But it's not that they don't know what God has commanded.
Well, maybe that's what made it so
Yeah.
enticing to her, is because God said you can eat anything in the garden except from that tree.
Okay. So it's almost like reverting to a kid stage, right? And I don't think it's any different sometimes in us adults. You know, I don't know. I think we all have a side of us that wants to maybe be rebellious a little bit. I remember, I may not ought to tell this, but I got to have confession this morning. But a long time ago, we were invited over a person's house, a widow's house, and the first thing she said to us when we came in there, I mean, this is right before, she says, "Don't touch anything." And she repeated that several times. And when I went in the house, you know, she had all these little doodads and things. And so when she was in the kitchen, guess what Sherry and I did? We just touched it. We kind of laughed. You know, we weren't picking it up or anything, but we touched everything. You know, simply because, why? She told us not to. And I'm thinking, we walked out of the house and said, "What did we do, man? What did we do? This was terrible." You know, but that sort of represents, I think, an innate reaction to something that's said that, you know, I don't know. The first thing you say to someone that's coming over, I mean, we just thought it was kind of strange. We loved the dear lady, but that was kind of strange. I should have been more respectful, but I didn't, you know, do it in front of her. She's gone to her grave not knowing. I guess she knows now. You know, I don't know. But anyway, yes, Connie.
That's why when my children were babies and they were little, I would say, "You can touch it. Just don't pick it up."
Yeah, don't pick it up.
And by doing that, they didn't break stuff.
So how many times have you gone into a store and it said, "Don't touch"? Did you touch it? So anyway, but I'm illustrating that because there is, I don't know what it is, and maybe it's because it's just a desire to go against, you know, something. It's almost a rebellious in the back of your mind, you know. But it comes to the forefront, though, seriously, in regard to God's laws and His commandments. It becomes a lack of, I guess, trust. I think we're almost constituted to figure out things for ourselves, right? We want to, that's almost the way to learn. Kids are that way, and you know, you can tell them not to touch something, but you know, they're eventually probably going to do it, and they'll learn that they should have trusted mommy or daddy, you know, who said don't do that. But some knuckleheads like me come along, and it's just, you know, I learn by, you know, I learn myself. So I've had to correct that and learn to trust God. So when He says don't, I have to know that God understands, God knows, God created us, God sees a bigger picture than perhaps what we see. And so it's in our best interest. And it's no different understanding parenting with children. You know, we behave most of the time in the best interest of the child, you know. It's not saying there's not sometimes selfishness about us or, you know, but that was the problem with Eve. Why would I even be at the tree knowing that I can have all others? Okay? And so in the simple temptation of Satan to get them to contemplate and to think and to desire ultimately was the downfall. It was a lack of trust in God, a lack of faith in what God has said. So I think that carries out in the Old Testament history in the way that kings react. It's like when Saul was king and he's about to go fight the Amalekites, he's told to wait by Samuel for a certain time so they could offer sacrifice and ask God's blessing in the battle. But he sees the armies building up, and so he takes a practical approach. Surely Samuel will understand here, they're already encamped and ready to go, and we're just kind of hanging around this little, place here waiting to offer a sacrifice. That's not real practical, right? And so he rushes and he offers a sacrifice. And as soon as he tries to do that, who shows up? Samuel does. And Samuel just rips him, and as a result, he lost the kingdom eventually because of his disobedience. But what's practical, what seems right, what seems perhaps would work out, those are not the standards of our action. Something may seem practical, but it may not be the right thing according to God's way. And so I have to abide myself accordingly. I believe this applies in business, in school, outside of our particular, congregation. It's life orientation in God's way. And it doesn't always seem like the practical way to others who are around us. So we come to Ahab, and Ahab has a desire. I think he almost seems to want to do what's right at times, but he is overwhelmed, in a sense, by all the practicality of being king and forming alliances with foreigners against, greater kingdoms. And so there's that issue that a king has to contemplate, because he has to protect his people. So the way worldly people protect their people is forming alliances back then. And God said, don't do that, because what happens when you form an alliance back in the ancient days is there would be a marriage, a sort of a marriage of a sign between the king and the daughter, one of the daughters of a regional empire king, and it would represent a coalition. And when that daughter by the other empire was given to the king of Israel, what did that daughter bring with her? Her beliefs, her idols, and that was one of the main reasons that God had forbidden these marriages to foreign wives, because it wasn't just the relationship, it was the god and goddesses, the beliefs, the theology of these foreign powers that got brought into Israel. And so from an Israel standpoint, things look good, looks pleasing to the eye, it seems to make sense, the things that they do. We face the same thing today with denominationalism, with all kinds of religions out there. What does it hurt to have some kind of tradition, some kind of thing that we do or believe in? At least we believe in something. It's just not the way to think about our relationship with God. It's a lack of trust. No matter the kindness I might exhibit, the compassion I might have, it could be misplaced kindness and misplaced compassion if it's not of God. And this is something that the king struggled with and God's people struggled with throughout. So we come to Ahab, and God has given victory to Ahab against the Syrians, and they're also called the Arameans. It depends on what translation you're reading. It's the same group of people. And they have been constantly at war with North Israel. It comes to a head with Elisha later in chapter 6 of 2 Kings. But this is the enemy of Israel. And so Ahab has had a period of time in which he saw Elijah defeat the prophets of Baal at Mount Carmel. So his faith, his belief went up. Then we just read last week about Naboth's vineyard and what was said about him and that he was going to die, and it really rattled him a little bit. And he came forward. it said, hey, I'm sorry. He repented, it seemed, of all of this. And so we have another highlight. But he's one of these up and down individuals that is like the surf of the sea, that's driven and tossed by the wind. It depends on what's dominant at the time. It seems to influence him more than truth does, more than God does. So his religion is practical. His religion has to do with situational things, and that's an issue. So, chapter 22, for 3 years, verse 1, the Syrians and Israel continued without war. But in the 3rd year, Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah, came down to the king of Israel. And the king of Israel said to his servants, do you know that Ramoth Gilead belongs to us, and we keep quiet and do not take it out of the hand of the king of Syria? And he said to Jehoshaphat, will you go with me to battle at Ramoth Gilead? And Jehoshaphat said to the king of Israel, I am as you are, my people as your people, my horses as your horses. Here is one of those unusual situations where we have the combining of North and South Israel for a campaign against the enemy. So Syria has captured certain places in Israel, and King Ahab is asking Jehoshaphat to help him reclaim what the Syrians have taken. And Jehoshaphat agrees. Okay, so there's periods in which they work together, then there's periods in which there's, steep rivalry. And Jehoshaphat said to the king of Israel, and this is where you see the difference between the southern kingdom and the northern kingdom. Let's inquire first for the word of the Lord. Okay, that was the first thought of King Jehoshaphat. Let's make sure that we have the blessings of God. Let's inquire. The inquiry of the Lord was kind of interesting. We see it more magnified during David's day, that before David went out to battle, the high priest would come to him, and David evidently would put his hands into the garment of the high priest to get the Urim and the Thummim, these 2 stones. And however the stones laid out, okay, I don't know if they were like, just think of it like on one side it was black, one side it was white, and on both of them. And so if they were like one black, one white, it might be no. But if it was all black or all white, all the same, it was probably yes, So there was some way in which they inquired, and God revealed himself through the Urim and the Thummim. That's what they were called. So he had put his hands into the vest of the high priest, pull out the stones, and whatever the stones revealed, God revealed, he'd either go to battle or he wouldn't. Okay? And so this is something that the kings were involved in that engaged the high priest. Okay? So see, the religion, the theology or whatever was connected to the kingship. All right? So it was a theocracy, God's the leader, he's the real king, but the information was given through the prophets and the high priests. And so they want to inquire from God. So then the king of Israel, this is what Ahab does. He says, okay, he gathered the prophets together, about 400 men, and said to them, okay, this is sort of a recollection, causes you to reflect on what past event. Mount Carmel, the 450 prophets of Baal, they were all slaughtered, weren't they? Okay. But we've had some time now. There's others that have been appointed. You remember the Asherah, the feminine priestesses were not. They were protected by Jezebel. So the question would be, are these supposedly prophets of Israel and not prophets of Baal? Well, whether they were of Israel or of Baal, they seem to be false prophets. And we'll ask ourselves, well, what makes them false prophets? So we have Israel gathered the prophets together, about 400 men, and said to them, shall I go to battle against Ramoth Gilead, or shall I refrain? And they said, go up, for the Lord will give you it into the hand of the king. But Jehoshaphat said, now this is interesting. So Ahab gets his prophets. Shall I go up? And they say, yes, go up, and you'll have success from the Lord. Well, Jehoshaphat is a little bit, I don't know. You know, these are 400 prophets who are unanimous. And Jehoshaphat comes in and said, is there not here another prophet of the Lord of whom we may inquire? Why would he say something like that? How come 400 prophets is not sufficient to Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah, in this situation? He doesn't seem to trust Ahab or these prophets who are speaking, because what's happened to Israel? They've gone into idolatry. Maybe they've come back, but they've altered the worship of God. They forbid people from going to Jerusalem to worship. And so you might recall that it was Jeroboam who set up idols at Bethel, okay, to keep Israel from North Israel from going into the land of Judah, so that they'd worship there in North Israel. And so he changed some of the festivals, and you know he made a lot of changes, though they mimicked the religion of of Judah, of God's laws. He changed all of that, you know, in minor and major ways. So Jehoshaphat, although he wants to go and help his brother, you know, they're brothers, they're Jews, right? He wants verification. Is there someone else? It seems kind of strange, and I think this might be a principle that comes up when everybody is saying yes. It might be a what? Setup. It might be a setup or a trap. Be careful of the yes. You know, there might need to be I don't know, a further search of things. I remember Jesus saying, beware when everybody what? Speaks well of you. Just got to be a little careful. And so all these prophets are saying, yes, go up. You'll be the greatest king and everything. I don't know what all they said, but they're guaranteeing him victory. And so the king of Israel said to Jehoshaphat, there is yet one man by whom we may inquire of the Lord, Micaiah, the son of Imlah, but I hate him. For he never prophesies good concerning me, but evil. So it's almost like he's been kept out of the loop here, because you know what he's going to say. It's not going to be positive. It's going to be something negative because he hates me. Now, what's the truth about the matter? That's how he feels, but that's not the truth, is it? What's the real truth? I mean, do what? It's not what he wants to hear. I mean, we have, I don't know, all kinds of passages in the New Testament, particularly toward us preachers, right? Preach the word in season and what? Out of season, when it's convenient and when it's not. And then there's the prophecy that the time will come when people will begin to have what kind of ears? What does that mean? Yeah, they won't. Yeah, they'll gravitate to that which they like to hear or want to hear. It's easy to find a false preacher, a false prophet, a false seance person. You know, it's easy to find that because they're ultimately, their purpose is to give you what you want. I mean, you could build a career around that, and many have, is to give people what they want. And it's not to say that everything that we're doing or thinking is bad, but is terrible when you don't allow or don't want to hear instructive criticism or even a word of truth. And I keep going back to Galatians when Paul's very forceful with them. Have I become your enemy? Okay, your enemy? Paul's my enemy. He hates us. Why? Because he never writes in favor of our, actions or activity. He's always a naysayer. And who likes naysayers? You like naysayers? We don't really like naysayers very much. Why? What is it about truth that gets under our skin sometimes? What? It stings, yeah. It's just, we might really want to believe something, or really want to think something is true, or really desire approval. And it just stings and hurts a little bit when it's not favorable. So, it's difficult medicine. It's difficult medicine, and you just can't put sugar in the medicine. Sometimes you got to take it like it is, right? All right. And the king of Israel said to Jehoshaphat, there is one man by whom we may inquire of the Lord, Micaiah, the son of Imlah, but I hate him, for he never prophesies good concerning me, but evil. And the reason he's labeled it evil and nothing good is because Micaiah is not there to give him approval and to tell him how great a person he is. He's to present what? The truth. And if you're always wanting approval, you're always wanting to do what you desire, what you want, then don't call the preacher, don't read the Bible, stay away from it. Else it will become your enemy. Okay. So let's continue. And Jehoshaphat said, well, let not the king say so. Then the king of Israel summoned an officer and said, bring quickly Micaiah, the son of Imlah. I wonder how he said that. Now the king of Israel and Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah, were sitting on their thrones, arrayed in their robes at the threshing floor at the entrance of the gate of Samaria. And all the prophets were prophesying before them. And Zedekiah, the son of Canaanah, made for himself horns of iron and said, thus says the Lord, with these you shall push the Syrians until they are destroyed. So we have a lead prophet, Zedekiah, who comes along, and he has these horns that represent strength. And he says, God's going to give you victory. Okay, he must have been a very charismatic type of individual, I guess. Thus says the Lord, with those you shall push the Syrians until they are destroyed. And all of the prophets prophesied so and said, go up to Ramoth Gilead and triumph. The Lord will give it into the hand of the king. So, not only did Zedekiah, with the images of the horn saying, go and just, ram the people and take what is yours. All the prophets, yeah. And 400 people is a lot of people, isn't it? And so you could probably imagine all of them being cheerleaders for Ahab and Jehoshaphat to go up. And the messenger who went and summoned Micaiah said to him, behold, the words of the prophets with one accord are favorable to the king. Let your word be like the word of one of them and speak favorably. So preacher, we want to hire you, but we want you not to preach on this, and we want you to be, the encourager and whatever, the feel-good dinner speaker. You want to be the showboat guy. Yes?
Up until this point, the prophets, what they said, he heard what he wanted to hear.
Yes.
Because they never said, you the king They said to the king. But then when they came up with the horns and said, this is what you're gonna do to them, that's what they actually said to him to say, you're the king, you're gonna do this. But until that point, it really wasn't a false prophet, the way I read it.
Okay.
Because they said the king, they didn't say you. So up until this point, now they're really telling him what he wants to hear.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that will become even clearer when it talks about believing a delusion.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's continue. Speak favorably. But Micaiah said, as the Lord lives, what the Lord says to me, that I will speak. And we had come to the king. The king said to him, Micaiah, shall we go up to Ramoth Gilead to battle, or shall we refrain? And he answered, go up and triumph. For the Lord will give it into the hand of the king. So his message wasn't any different, was it? No, but listen to this. But the king said to him, how many times shall I make you swear that you speak to me nothing but the truth in the name of the Lord? So Micaiah tells him what he wants to hear, and Ahab is very quick to note that he's not telling the truth. This is interesting because it shows you, well, let me ask you, what's interesting about this interaction? What's interesting about Ahab and Micaiah here?
Ahab always wants, he sounds like he wants Micaiah to say something good about it. He said, all he does is speak evil.
Yeah. So say something favorable, so he does.
Yeah.
And then, what?
He disagrees.
So what does that tell you, though, about Ahab's deep-seated belief? Does he really believe all the other prophets, or does he know Micaiah is going to tell him the truth?
That's why he thinks it's stuff, because he always tells him the truth. He don't want to hear it.
And he knows. He knows. That's what's fascinating to me about, if you call it, and it's kind of like the faith that he never tried. He has the faith that he never committed to, or something. I don't know, because he believes that Micaiah is holding back, and that he knows and he expects Micaiah to say something that's against what he wants to hear. He recognizes that in this prophet. That tells me, am I justified in believing? That tells me that he does respect Micaiah and what he has to say, even though he never likes it. It's almost like, who was it that loved to hear the preaching of John the Baptizer? Wasn't it Herod? He enjoyed listening. And not only that, I think there were others who indicated that they enjoyed listening, to Jesus. Even Pilate's wife was warning, and Pilate knew something was up, but he was too cowardly to stand up for anything. So, you going to say something, Dallas, back there? You're laying forward, man. You got your mouth open.
I don't know. I feel like it's in Micaiah's delivery. I think this is one of those
It might be.
sarcasm moments
Yeah.
of sarcasm.
Yeah.
that we were
I
talking
think so too.
Go up.
Yeah, go up. Don't worry.
You'll be fine. You'll be fine. And Ahab goes, see what I tell you. Every time, this guy.
Yeah.
But, the amount of peer pressure that Micaiah has faced.
Yeah. He's standing alone as far as this world stuff is concerned. He's not alone. God's with him. Okay? But there's awful pressure upon him.
Even the messenger is like, hey, look, man. Everybody else, you gotta just
Yeah.
go along.
And you'll be all right,
You'll be just fine if you just say what they're saying.
Yeah.
We
So,
get that a lot.
you know, he's risking himself because we know that if the king doesn't like what you say or an action, the king, you know, and we've seen this illustrated among pagan kings, that they'll kill the individual. That's what that was something that Esther took a risk in approaching the king, and others who have taken risks, during Daniel's day, in approaching the king and all of this. So he says, I hate him, for he never prophesies good concerning me. Let not the king say so. Then the king of Israel summoned him. Now the king of Israel and Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah, were sitting on their thrones. We've read that. And Zedekiah, the son of Canaanah, made for himself horns of iron. Okay, we've read that. So, verse 13. And the message went up, summoned Micaiah, and said to him, Behold, the words of the prophets with one accord are favorable. Now speak favorable. But Micaiah said, and here's what his commitment is, that the Lord lives, the Lord says to me that I will speak. Now this is a theme that I emphasized in my class on preaching and everything. You know, that's our mandate. We've got to speak. Of course, we speak the truth in love, but we cannot stand on any other ground than what the Bible says. And when he had come to the king said to him, Micaiah, shall we go up? He answered, Go up, go up. But the king said, How many times shall I make you swear that you speak to me nothing but the truth in the name of the Lord? And he said, I saw all Israel scattered on the mountains, and the sheep that have no shepherd. That ring a bell to you? The sheep that have no. Isaiah also mentions this in regard to the disciples. And the Lord said, These have no master. Let each return to his home in peace. And the king of Israel said to Jehoshaphat, Did I not tell you that he would not prophesy good concerning me, but evil? So he takes the word of Micaiah as something against him. Maybe he thinks that the prophet does have a chip on his shoulder, something against Ahab. But he calls it evil. What happens when people go away from God? They call good evil, and evil what? Good. This kind of gets flipped, doesn't it? And Micaiah said, Therefore, hear the word of the Lord. I saw the Lord sitting on his throne, and all the host of heaven standing beside me, on his right hand and on his left. And the Lord said, Who will entice Ahab, that he may go up and fall at Ramoth Gilead? And one said one thing, and another said another thing. Then a spirit came forward and stood before the Lord, saying, I will entice him. And the Lord said to him, By what means? And he said, I will go out, and I will be a lying spirit in the mouth of his prophets. And he said, You are to entice him, and you shall succeed. Go out and do so. Now therefore, behold, the Lord has put a lying spirit in the mouth of these your prophets. The Lord has declared disaster for you. Some have problem with this passage. What would it be?
What would it be?
Yeah, what's the issue here?
God deceived him, or God was
Yeah.
deceiving him.
God deceived him? Or did God allow him to be deceived? You remember the book of Job? What did God allow Satan to do? Pretty much everything against Job except what? Kill him. God did that. We allowed it. For what purpose? Do you know in that particular situation, God was staking his very character upon a human being named Job? There's no one like him. Satan said, I'll get him to bend the knee. I'll get him to curse you to your face. You won't. Here is God came up with the idea. I'll let you, but I'll stake everything on him. He won't do it. And Satan did everything he could to him, except take his life. And we have the book of Job that deals with suffering and all this stuff. One of the greatest pieces of literature in all of humanity. Studied at secular schools and everywhere else. Problem of human suffering. God allowed it. What was the reason that God allowed it? Huh? Proof of faith. Testing of our faith. The interesting thing is, you have to understand this about the language of the Old Testament, and really the language of the Bible. God is sovereign over all things, isn't he? So the Jews, if something bad happened, they always blamed God about it. Something good, they gave God credit. They didn't decipher between, well, the devil did it, because God is God, and they accepted God's world. Bad things happen, good things happen, right? We get a little insight from the story that there's a war that goes on for faith. So what does it mean about the trials? If God tests our faith, or our faith is a trial, what might he be allowing? We ever think of it that way? God is allowing things to what? To happen? God allows things. You know, if you had a coin, on one side, it would be, what is it? A test, the testing of our faith. On the flip side of that is the idea of it's, how should I say it? Words escape me. A trial, a test. These are not bad things, a trial or a test. They prove our faith. And we know that what also comes about through the testing of our faith. Huh? Growth, endurance, deeper faith. We hang on to God and trust him. So the testing of our faith, God allows circumstances. That's never contemplated in the discussion about good and evil in the world. See, it's like, why does God allow evil in the world? If he's a good God, he shouldn't allow that. But God takes another position. You know, what brought evil into the world is sin. So you could say, well, we're responsible for all that's happened in the world because human beings brought sin into the world. That wasn't the original plan or intent. We're planning to go to a heaven where all tears are wiped away, everything is as it should be, as was originally created. We're the ones that brought all this into the world. We never contemplate that. Death, right? Sickness, disease, tragedy, you know, all these things happen as a result of sin coming into the world. But God also allows things to prove our faith, to eliminate the dross from the genuine, you know, metal of our faith. And the Bible talks about that in the New Testament, everywhere. Yes.
Thank God. You know, we all know that God allows free will.
Yeah.
He allows free will to all of us. And when things like this happen, like I worked 20 years, I was supposed to sing that like a lot of times it's to see what we do about it, how we react, and how we grow from it. You know, because we make choices. Even then, we make choices.
Yeah.
That's just, you know.
Yeah. God does not solicit us to do evil. That's brought out in James. He does not solicit. He does not solicit. But he might allow something. Oh, exactly. But it's never contemplated from the standpoint of the testing of our faith, and of the standpoint that if you really want to blame anybody, you ought to blame us, you know, for all the tragedy that's come in our life. Now, it doesn't mean that God or evil is responsible for everything that happens. But we do know that in this allowance here that we see that God has allowed, even these prophets to speak. Now, who's behind the prophets? You know, who's making them? They have free will. He's not overtaking them, but they've been influenced. And it's the same thing that we read about in, 1st or 2nd Thessalonians, God sends a deluding spirit. Why? Because people want to hear what they want to hear. Well, okay. I tell you, a good place to study this is Romans chapter 1, where it says God gave them over. It's talking about the Gentile. What does it mean God gave them over? Well, he gave them over to that which they wanted to do. He gave them over to it. Yes.
My question, or the thing that bothers me is where's the Ahab of chapter 21
Yeah.
versus here? Because Elijah came to him with some extremely negative news. Almost it's at the same level of this news, right?
Yeah.
And his response was sackcloth, ashes, and fasting.
Yeah, but this time it's not, is it?
But this time is not. Where's that Ahab? What happened
I don't know.
between this time and that time? Because it's just as severe.
Yeah. It's like I said, Ahab's up and down. You can't pin him down. He's up and down.
Is it the peer pressure? Is he wanting to perform in front of Jehoshaphat? Is he wanting to impress him? It baffles me.
Yeah, it is baffling because he does repent earlier, and here he has none of that. Let's continue. Hear the word of the Lord. So the word of the Lord is given. Then there's this vision of the council of God's hosts. They're having a conversation about Ahab, which is interesting. I don't know how much of that is just simply as a vision that's given us, or how much to read into this council that's going on, that's discussed. But it's interesting that Ahab, an individual, is the person that's being discussed about. And from heaven's perspective, Ahab is going to do what Ahab wants to do, right? So the time is up. I see I've run along here. Sorry. I know you're waiting with bated breath here. So we'll pick up that and finish it and go on to another section. Lost track of time. At least I have a cliffhanger, mate.